Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome to week one of GWS 423. I'm so glad to have you. Once again, I am Dr. Kate, and here we are in week one of our course content. Right off the bat, I do want to remind you and give you a bit of a content warning that some of the materials that we're dealing with in week one can be difficult and potentially triggering for some. So I just want to give you that content warning for that material. And you will find that during these weeks, we will be dealing with material that have many difficult themes and often very personal themes. But such is the nature of what we are discussing and the experience that we are hoping to have in this class, and really examining some of our experiences and using that as a way to decenter some of our experience as well. To really think about that we are not the measure of all things, and that body politics are all at once micro and deeply, deeply personal and individual, and they are also tremendously macro and public and global. Because when we think about it, our bodies really are this common denominator of humanity and experience. We all have one, and we all sort of occupy different modes and forms of embodiment. So we're going to be spending the next several weeks, 15 weeks together, thinking about that idea, right, of what is body politics. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I wanted to start with a bit of a quote that can help situate some of our thinking about this. The body is something we have, yet also it is what we are. It is both subject and object at the same time. It is individual and personal, yet it is also common to all humanity. So, as we go through this lecture and the themes for this week, I want us to be thinking about some different things and some questions that we can be sort of ruminating about as we head into our discussion for the week. We can think about bodies as a way that we can understand society, right? As I was holding up this book, this idea of writing on the body, that our bodies are symbolic of cultural norms, of social realities, of expectations, of roles that we play, of expressions, of structure and organization, right? Of law. It's all of health and medicine. It's all of these things. We perform through the body and we experience these moments, and our social realities are mediated through the body. So before we sort of dive in too far, let's get some baseline definitions going. So, what is body politics? What are we doing in this class? And when we think about the female body in the world and exploring the politics of the body, what are we talking about here when we're talking about this? So, let's get a baseline definition. Body politics are the practices and policies through which powers of society regulate the human body, as well as the struggle over the degree of individual and social control of the body. So essentially, body politics is this idea that bodies matter. They matter and they mediate our lived experiences. That is, our bodies are always constantly existing in this hierarchy, in this amorphous web of power and resistance. Our bodies have value depending on a variety of factors, or they are devalued in many ways, depending on a variety of factors. And that power and those modes of resistance that are occurring are also always changing. Our bodies are always in flux. The meanings of them, the narratives that we are inhabiting and embodying, do not go up and down, and they do not move in a straight line. It's more like this, right? So, our body narratives are nonlinear, they are tremendously contextual, and they are dependent on time and place and circumstance. And in this class, we will very much sort of take this framing of bodies as social constructs. Not that they aren't real. They are very real to us, and the feeling and impact of our bodies are very real. Um, but the way that we think about them are social constructs and cultural constructs on how we read on the body. So, what are we going to be thinking about and talking about over the next 15 weeks? Right? We do not exist independent of our bodies. They mediate and they form our lived experiences. So, I want us to be thinking about things like when you are moving through the world, and this is a particularly interesting time to be discussing body politics, especially this element of control of bodies, social control, and where bodies can go, and the value that we place on certain bodies over others. It's a wild time. We're going to have a lot to talk about over the next 15 weeks. But I want you to think about the spaces that you occupy, your homes, your workplaces, college campus, right? These various spaces that your bodies enter into. And I want you to think about how you come into contact with and interact with other bodies. What do you notice about bodies? Do you notice faces? Do you notice size? Do you notice measure of ability? Ability, another construct, certainly one we'll be talking a lot about this semester. Do you think about bodies? Do you think about your own? And when you think about it, what do you think about? In what contexts do we think about bodies, and how do we consider them? So in this class, we will talk about bodies in a medical context, in a health context. We will talk about them socially and culturally. We will think about celebrity bodies, the kinds of bodies that are so visible to us, and so familiar. Isn't that a fascinating reality? And digital bodies, especially now when we are functioning so much virtually and on social media, more than we ever have before. This has become truly our modus operandi of communication. So, how do we use our bodies in this sort of two-dimensional space of the screen? Um, that's new territory, and I'm excited to tread all of it with you and to navigate all of that. In thinking about the body politics of the screen, the digital body. We're going to think about bodies in a context of various kinds of violences. We're going to be thinking about sexuality and race and age and gender and sex presentation, size and ability, and all different kinds of intersecting identities. So for this first week, very importantly, I have assigned to you a TED Talk by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is credited with naming the term intersectionality. The idea of intersectionality long precedes Kimberly Crenshaw's sort of naming of it. Truly, it's one of sort of a foundational idea of Black feminist thinking from centuries ago. But it is an absolutely crucial framework that we begin our class with. So that is why I have assigned the Kimberly Crenshaw TED Talk to you, and it does deal with some difficult material. So I just give you some content warning. It has themes of police brutality and violence against Black women in particular. So just but also in like tremendously important content for any and all cultural and social and political moments, but in particular right now, I think it's something that we must bear witness to, and we must talk about and use as a really important conceptual framework. This idea that we are constantly inhabiting, right? All of these various kinds of identities, and those identities and the values therein inform our experiences of privilege and oppression. And so much of that is embodied, right? So body politics and intersectionality, they really do go hand in hand in many ways. I also want you to think about this week, as we're starting to discuss and we're starting to dig into some of these themes, how we perform through the body. So, how are you using your body in day to day life? And really get down to the nitty gritty of it. What are some of the rituals that you are undergoing? Um, some of the choices you make, the experiences that you have, how you think about your own body, um, and the stories that your body tells you and you tell about yourself related to your body. So I encourage you to do some writing and some reflection this week as we dig into the material. Um, and that leads us, right, to one of our first readings, a 1950. Is it 56 or 57? The Horace Minor piece on body ritual among the Nasarima. Um, I don't want to give anything away. Maybe some of you have already read this piece. It's a pretty classic piece in anthropology, um, but it has taken this sort of ethnographic frame of looking at. I want you to be able to see my face more. It's taking this ethnographic methodology of exploring this particular culture of people. And I'm really curious to read your discussions about what stood out to you about this piece and this idea of body rituals, those things that we keep secret. Um, what do we express? What do we make more visible and more present about our bodies? But certainly, our bodies are like a veritable feast of functionality that range from like the way we've constructed it as being like that super gross, right? But we have these like private spaces, these shrines to the body. Um, the Nasarima people, this culture, are very much rooted in this idea. Excuse me. Oh, the politics of a cough. Woo! Takes on a whole different meaning now, right? Um, but the Nasarima, the one of the baseline sort of foundational ideas is this sense of the body is ugly and it is sick and it is diseased and it is in need of improvement. So it's always towards this notion of the paragon of health. And Horace Minor talks about the secrecy of the body and this notion of sadistic ritual. And I would love for us to reflect on some of the rituals that we undergo and whether they are sadistic or not. But I mean, if you get a few minutes and if you're into it, I was doing some reading recently about the history of armpit shaving, like when and how that became a thing. And the history of it like is fairly surprising of like how it became um a expected part of feminine beauty maintenance, right? Something like underarm hair. So political, right? I mean, like it is so um enveloped in these ideas of politics that if there is a female or feminine presenting individual who raises their arm and we see underarm hair, especially if that hair is dark, and especially if we're talking about skin colors other than white, right? There is this formula that occurs in our brain where we make all kinds of assumptions about this individual, everything from how they were raised, how they identify, to political leanings, right? I It's fascinating the way that we can read bodies in that way. So, I also think it's just super interesting that you are all kind of getting a glimpse into like we would be in a classroom right now. So you are already getting more of a glimpse into my personal space. I'll probably wear some pretty fun hats at different points during these lectures. We'll see. But thinking about this culture of the Nasarima, similarities, differences to some of the bodily expressions and rituals that we undergo in contemporary American society. Something to think about. You also have a piece by Rose Whites talking about the history of women's bodies. And this is, I think this is a really important sort of foundational framing piece as well, because I want us to really start to think about how our ideas of bodies have been formed by and politicized and pathologized by all of these things. Certainly, it's very much rooted in religious doctrine, especially early Christianity and Protestantism, theological roots of this idea of female bodies in particular being dangerous, being out of control, being more driven by sort of earthbound desires. And we will dive into this very heavily next week when we're reading Bordeaux and Bartke, as more of this theory, but that women have been historically positioned as being of the body, and men have been positioned as being of the mind. Again, we'll read about it more next week, but that some of the most prominent Western philosophers that we like base a lot of our science on today literally thought of women in the womb as being half-baked men, that they were denied a certain amount of heat, and so they were not able to form, and so that women have literally been framed as these sort of grotesque, monstrous, half-formed, not quite men creatures. Um, in all honesty, we can still see a great deal of examples of this in contemporary society. One of the ones that jumps out to me immediately is the idea of school dress codes and how deeply gender oppressive they are and so stringently geared toward female and feminine modesty, because we are making the assumption that girls and women are these sexual threats to this otherwise rational order um, of the male mind, right? And when we think about that in a context of education, it's like, woo, yeah. Talk about body politics and the value of bodies. So what White's is giving us is some of this history of how women's bodies have been framed over time. And again, this piece does deal with some difficult themes. Certainly, talking about sexual violence and rape, as women's bodies being viewed literally as property damage. As and we're talking specifically about white women in this context as well. When we reframe it to think about Black women's experiences, they were treated as not even, I mean, literal property, as slaves, and treated as subhuman, and that their bodies were quite literally resources for labor, for reproduction, for labor of multiple forms. I think you'll really find the White's piece interesting, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. But I wanted to point you towards this idea of all of these institutions over here: religion, science, media, philosophy, industry. All of these major social institutions that we have played a really, really significant role in shaping our contemporary ideas of the value that we place on female and feminine presenting bodies in particular. The reason this class is the female body in the world, and not that we won't talk about, we will certainly talk about things like masculinity, because in order to talk about femininity, you are inherently talking about masculinity. That is the binary system that we are operating within. But I hope that we can also get beyond some of that and question our very understandings of how we produce knowledge, how we think about experience. And that's why I really want to invite you in this class to use experience and use literal physical feeling and physiological responses to think about your social position, and in and reflect on it and interrogate it and challenge it. And we are taking it global. So we're sort of beginning in the West with these frameworks for the first couple of weeks, and then we are taking it much further afield when thinking about the global politics of the female feminine body. So, those are some of the central ideas related to your content for the week. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say in the discussion. Um, okay, and let's just talk a little bit about intersectionality here, right? All of these things inform our experiences of privilege and oppression. And my hope is that the TED Talk, if you are not as familiar with the idea of intersectionality, my hope is that the TED Talk helps clarify some of it. But one of the largest takeaways here is that all oppression is connected. And this can be a deeply overwhelming feeling. But in particular, when we're related to body politics, bodies matter. They just really, really do. And that's why we have a class about it. So I wanted, before we end, and let's do just a couple of logistics first before we wrap up, right? I just want to make sure that everybody is feeling clear about the expectations for the class. So I sent you an email with the syllabus. Hopefully you've read it and have looked it over and you're like, this sounds great, excited. And you've had the opportunity to look through some of the readings and viewings for the next 15 weeks. I'm super excited about them. I hope you find them really engaging and interesting, and things that you want to read and look at related to this class and what we're talking about. And so everything is on Canvas. Everything should be web links or PDFs or videos embedded on Canvas. And you will get a video lecture from me weekly on Tuesday mornings, because we're going to start our weeks on Tuesdays. And then we will have the opportunity for folks to meet in person on Monday afternoons from 2:30 to 3:45 in Humanities 2650, I believe is our room. We will not meet until September 14th because next Monday is Labor Day. So that will be our first meeting. We will see sort of where we are at with everything by September 14th. But for those of you that would like the opportunity to meet in person, I will be there on September 14th. And we will use Mondays to discuss, to reflect, to think about the things you've read, to check in with one another, and then we will start a new subject or theme on Tuesday mornings. So basically your week starts on Tuesdays. You've got discussion board posts due in your groups by Friday nights about the readings and viewings, and you can check out the discussion prompts. I only have a few weeks up so far of discussion, but I'll load more of those soon so you can see them. And I haven't mentioned, there's always just going to be glare from my glasses, just like all the time. So we'll just get very used to that over the next 15 weeks. So you have those initial posts due by Friday nights. And I encourage you not to do your post and then immediately do your peer responses. If you want to do it that way, I suppose that's okay. But I encourage you to post, to read some other posts, to reflect, and to do your peer responses by Sunday evenings, by Sunday nights. So you need to do at least 3 substantial peer responses each week on the discussion board, and this is all towards your overall participation grade. As I said, being in person is in no way a part of your assessment, because I don't feel right about that. But for those of you that want that opportunity to meet in person and sort of gain a little extra community and connection through that, we will do our darndest to foster as much as we can online and via Canvas and in this community as well. But that in-person option is there. So please let me know if you have any questions about that. So this week, as we begin, you should be doing your readings and viewings. And yeah, let's keep it that we'll do our initial post for Friday, and peer responses by Sunday, and then we'll do some reflection on Monday, before we begin a new week on Tuesday. So, oh yeah, topical body politics. Um, these assignments are, I hope the syllabus explains it pretty clearly. Uh, 2 to 3 pages every couple of weeks, you have one of these assignments, and this is for you to just like go out there and find some weird shit related to body politics. Um, in the past, like one of my favorite ones in the past, wellness Barbie. I mean, just like check it out. Like Barbie going to get a massage. What is the wellness industrial complex we are living in right now? Oh, I just want to see you all, and I just want to talk about everything. Um, anyway, so those are just great little opportunities for you every couple of weeks to dig into some of the body politics in our contemporary society. Certainly, you should take it global, if you want to think outside the box. Look at advertisements, look at things happening in the news cycle. Look at, oh my gosh, we have an election coming up. Um, I mean, think about the female politicians and the people that we have in leadership. Body politics are absolutely everywhere, right? So, lots to think about. So, I will leave you with this, just a couple of really important and wonderful ideas, as we move forward from week one. You have a wonderful piece by Sonia Renee Taylor that you are reading this week, and she wrote a phenomenal book called The Body is Not an Apology, and we will be engaging with Renee Taylor's work throughout. But Sonia Renee Taylor says, there's no way to make my blackness separate from my queerness, separate from my womanness, separate from whatever other parts of me. I live in the amalgamation of those identities. So this is very much in keeping with that idea of intersectionality, how body politics plays into this. And so I encourage you to be reflecting on sort of all of the different facets of your identity that make up your body narrative. And just because we are in this moment, we are in such an incredible social and cultural and political moment right now. There's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of doubt, there's some despair, fear, and uncertainty. And I just want to leave us today with a message of community, that I am here for you and as present as I possibly can be. For those of you who have had me in the past, I hope it can be brought home, even through this digital body of the screen, that teaching is a tremendous part of my identity and my sense of self and embodiment. And so for those who are new to this with me, I'm just excited to go on this journey together. So I want to leave you with this. This is a quote from Anasa Troutman, the CEO of Culture Shift Creative. And she writes, unless we're willing to make a commitment to community, we will never be well. Even if you wake up every morning and drink your juice and do your yoga, without that commitment to each other, we will not be well as a country and as a world. So I just want to leave us with that. Certainly drink your juice and do your yoga, right? It's just what I hope for everybody is that as we learn about body politics and we navigate through these systems, is that we realize that we are in a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal trap. And so I hope we can just do what makes us feel good. That's the goal. So, have a wonderful week. I'm excited to read your discussion posts, and please let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, let's get started.